Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and I'm all by my lonesome once again. Unfortunately, the busy Brian E. Roach is busy, missing in action. Once again, I really wanted him here. I'm kind of got a little bit of a sad face. Someone asked for a refund last week because it was just me. That hurt my feelings, made him feel good, as it usually does, as we poke fun at each other. But I really wanted him here for the topic of free agents. But before I jump onto that, just a little bit of current events. Steelers still hunting for a general manager here. They're in the process of seeing who may be stepping into Kevin Colbert's shoes when he retires following the upcoming NFL draft, which, just as a reminder, if you've missed any of the previous shows and some of my rants about that, go back and listen. We appreciate that. We appreciate all of you who tune in, and especially when I don't have Brian here to kind of anchor me. Some of the comments we get, particularly the YouTube viewers, and we love the listeners too as well. So thanks for your support. But as we're heading into some of this stuff, one of the big names coming around as you go with the general managers, typically, if you're not a dumpster fire team that is just canning your coaches and your staff and everything, redoing your organization every 2 years or as often as you change your socks and underwear, or the drawer, I should say, maybe the drawer. Some of you might get a little more usage out of that stuff, but you know what I mean. We're talking the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Jets and teams like that, and the Dolphins, the Texans. These teams, they're just they're a rudderless ship, and the Steelers aren't that way. So they landed a pretty big interview here with ESPN's Louis Riddick, considered to be a pretty big fish when it comes to general manager gets, and as far as his reputation around the league. Now, why hasn't Louis Riddick maybe been poking around at other jobs since being the Philadelphia Eagles GM back in 2013? Well, to be completely honest, when you work for ESPN, do you really want to go work for a team like the Jaguars? I mean, I don't try and kick people while they're down or poke fun, but there comes a time and a place where you call a spade, and the Jaguars are just a mess of a franchise. And those aren't the type of jobs I think you're leaving ESPN. It's got to be a pretty good living there. You get to sit and take it easy, and you get to watch all the football, and you're still ingrained, you're still in the game, and the people will have most of these spots. I'm not talking about like your Joe Buck or something like that. It's with Troy Aikman, but Troy Aikman and some of these guys, they had some success, or they know what they're doing when it comes to football, and that's the reason why they're sitting in the booths or doing the pregame shows, or doing NFL Live or NFL Game Day and all these other programs that are out. So I don't necessarily discount that they're out of the game. It doesn't mean that they're out of touch, that they had to be in a front office job. In fact, it's probably worse if you take somebody that's been fired 3 times from 3 different teams since Riddick has been with ESPN, in my opinion. We've seen some of this. Some of this times it might translate to success. Bruce Arians went to the booth and then went over to Tampa Bay, but Mike Mayock, not so much. And I digress even bringing up John Gruden, but that's a whole other situation as to why he's not employed currently. But you get some of these transitions, and they work or they don't. And I guess we'll see if Riddick is among the names. You throw the name in the hat. I've mentioned before Omar Khan, the salary cap guru with the Steelers. He's had some feelers from some other organizations as well as Brandon Hunt, too. Also one of the Steelers head scouts. So it's going to be interesting going forward. We'll keep you apprised of any news as we get it, but definitely had to mention that because that was one of the big headlines this morning. I'm logging in on all my devices and I'm seeing people argue and fight about different things, and it's just like, why don't they just get rid of Kevin Colbert right now? And Kevin Colbert has been with the Steelers since 2000. He's responsible for, believe it or not, you get people who argue about draft picks. I really don't want to go down this road because the draft is still far away, but you find 1 or 2 guys in the draft that end up being starters or major contributors, and that draft is a success. And as much as some people might want to hate certain drafts, like Artie Burns, started for 3 years or so before he flamed out. they got 3 starters at the top of that draft on the defense, Sean Davis and Javon Hargrave. And just because it doesn't translate into a Super Bowl, you have to understand like some of the things that were in place with Kevin Colbert, especially at the end of the Bill Cowher era and when Mike Tomlin took over. And he still did some real magical things, and he deserves like a whole show just to himself, especially for the second round picks he's found over the years, like Chase Claypool and Juju Smith-Schuster, and Mike Wallace in the 3rd round, and Martavis Bryant in the 4th round, and Le'Veon Bell, Stephon Tuitt was a 2nd rounder as well, and it's not including people want to say bust out of the 1st round, but when you're picking at like 28. Almost consistently, you're damn near in the 2nd round already, and that's kind of like my argument always is. And it's always the draft Twitter thing. The Steelers, you see it right now. I mentioned this on the last program that people are mocking edge rusher. They have the defensive player of the year, a Kevin Colbert pick, by the way. I know I should say it a little louder for everyone in the back, but it's like, let's ignore that one. Nah, we're going to bring up Jarvis Jones from a decade ago. Yeah, they've replaced him twice over already. I mean, the average career in the NFL, 3-4 seasons. I mean, really, if the 7th round punter, who's like, 6 or 8 picks from being Mr. Irrelevant, doesn't work out, I don't care. They don't care. You're throwing a dart at some of these things in the late rounds. You really will need to hit like the first 1 or 2 rounds if you get some contributors in the 3rd and 4th round. So be it. The Steelers, I mean, that was really a piece of work this whole offseason. Most people have forgotten the salary cap dropped, and now they're not going to be in that same position anymore. From 198 to 182 million. I got to bring some of these things up just because I know, even with the overlap, I might sound like a broken record. I know I don't have Bry here, like I said, to anchor me or set me straight. But I know some of you float in and out of some shows, and I just have to repeat it for those who may not have heard it previously. But that is one hell of a drop for your salary cap goes down lower than what it was 2 years previous. You don't have the scratch to go out and bring back a Mike Hilton, or not that I think Mike Hilton was ever a high priority, which, by the way, sack and blitz specialist who missed 4 games last year with the Steelers. I know he's in the Super Bowl right now, but in 17 games this year, a big goose egg in the Sacramento category. So not so much the blitz specialist. They do have a different system there, but the way the Steelers used him, he wasn't necessarily, lighting the world on fire with coverage and everything else, but he still did better last year. But those are the things where you have to sacrifice. Are we paying Mike Hilton this amount of money? I'm not dumping on him. He got money. He's a fine player. I'm just saying, can the Steelers afford to lose a guy like that? Yes. But Dupree would have been great to have. You saw he didn't do as well with the Titans. Again, that's like the system fit. A lot of guys leave the Steelers and they don't necessarily have the same success in their new digs. So that's going to be the topic of conversation today, is who might be going, who may be c'est la vie here. So the Steelers, like I said, I'm going to be pulling most of this from overthecap.com. I'm going to pull up, let's see. I just closed the tab. That always infuriates me because I got some things to talk about. I'm going to try and go through some of the restricted and exclusive rights free agents first on the list. But first of all, Over the Cap is estimating just a little over $208 million for this season, this upcoming season. Salary cap, could it be more? Sure, it could. This is probably where it should have been at least last year, from 198 to 208 instead of down to 182. So you lose $16 million there, and you're 30-some million over the cap. Ben Roethlisberger accounting for 25% almost of that entire team cap hit, and he had to take a pay cut. And then people wonder why. Why didn't they go sign these people? Why didn't they go fix this offensive line? It did the best you could with the draft. I think you got 2 fine 5 to 10 year starters in Najee Harris and Pat Freiermuth. I'm not going to complain about that. And this team, as garbage as they are, bad offensive line, a quarterback with a bad arm that's old and going to retire, still makes the postseason. Why is that? Oh, now you're going to say defense. But Mike Tomlin calls the plays, and Keith Butler, fire him. Oh, no, they're going to promote Terrell Austin. That's the other rumbling that I wanted to mention with the current events. Not a big shocker there, right? And, fire all them. They suck too. But they made the playoffs. But, hey, that's not the standard. The standard isn't having a winning season. The standard isn't making the playoffs. The standard has to be way, way the hell higher than that. And you see where I'm getting with this. It gets to be a little preposterous at times. I had an argument with someone about Leon Searcy the other day, talking about Steelers drafting O-linemen and how they don't draft O-linemen. Who are you drafting when you have Marquise Pouncey, David DeCastro, And then Alejandro Villanueva, who were all Pro Bowl. Now, mind you, Villanueva more the popularity contest, and maybe towards the end of the careers with Pouncey and DeCastro as well, legacy picks, but almost perennial All-Pros with two of those three guys and Pro Bowl type players. And Marcus Gilbert, until he got hurt, anchored the right tackle side. Why are you using a first or second round pick? We'll let them sit for 3 years. So then they play one season, they're really good, and then when you don't have the cap money, especially when a pandemic hits, you can't afford to bring them back and you complain anyways. Boom. Yeah, you knew I was going to get on my Epic Joe rants here. I need like a name for it. I need a name. Somebody come up with something clever. I'm pretty creative myself, but I'm on the spot here. I can't think of anything. People are like, hey, you know what? The Steelers, are they top 10 or whatever? The figure I got as far as cap space, yes, they are. I think they're 10th overall here. 31.2 is what over the cap is showing. They also show something called effective cap space 27, almost 30 million. Represents maximum cap space a team will have when it signs at least 51 players. So they don't have enough players under contract currently. Although they do have, I think it shows here, 61 players already committed for next year. That includes futures and reserves contracts, such as John Simon, for example, Anthony Miller. John Simon's an interesting one, man. He's what we call old hat. He's been around for a while, and I didn't even know that they could sign him to that type of contract, being a vested veteran, so to speak. So there's a punter that's been signed on here, Trey Edmonds and Chaz Green, Christian Kuntz, back on a 1 year contract, long snapper. So they've got they've got a couple different things going. Obviously, some guys that we liked last offseason, including Rico Bussey, Jay Sternberger, tight end. So that's going to factor into my free agent list. And these are all guys they signed, so it's relevant to the conversation here. Daniel Archibong, I might as well go through all of them. Daniel Archibong, Rico Bussey, Khalil Davis, Nathan Gilliam, Malcolm Pridgeon, Delonte Scott, Sam Sloman, Lyndon Stevens, Jay Sternberger, Donovan Steiner, Rex Sunahara, and Tyler Vaughns. Those were the original ones that were signed on the 18th of January. Christian Kuntz to a 1 year deal, and then Isaiah Johnson and Steven Sims got reserve future contracts, as did Trey Edmonds, Chaz Green, Anthony Miller, punter Cameron Nizelik, if I'm saying that one right, and then John Simon, edge rusher. So it's quite a few guys that they're already looking in this arms race to bring to camp with them. And now we can actually get down to business, because some of those will play in or factor into at least some of the depth spots. You could Simon play a lot of these names play. If you went to yourself and said, who the heck was that? Chances are you might have missed them playing this year. There were enough injuries with the Steelers, offensive line and then defensively all over, as to another reason why you get all these hot takes and people are PO'd about not winning the big one this year. Okay, I get it. Playoffs, it would have been nicer to not face Kansas City maybe. I saw a pretty good hot take about the Steelers and road trips this year too. And they won in Buffalo, they won in Baltimore, and they won in Cleveland. Now, I understand they lost in Green Bay. Maybe they shouldn't have lost in Green Bay. Officiating. Blocked kick. Yeah, okay. So, for a trash team, they played the Packers pretty tight to the vest on the road there. Yeah, you get blown out in Cincinnati and twice in Kansas City. Who wasn't having trouble with those two teams this season? You had the Chargers game, which ended up in a shootout. Ben Roethlisberger, if you remember, on his own flight, trying to get cleared from COVID from the week before. No practice. Minnesota Vikings, as we said all the way we said this in the summer, Thursday Night Football on the road does not behoove the road teams. So when I saw this take about their problems on the road, they're 3-5. It wasn't really that big. They could flip that number easily. Maybe they have better luck with the Chargers or the Vikings or something of that nature. I don't sweat these details as much as some other people do. What about at home? What if they beat the Raiders at home instead and they're a 10-win team? It's just, and the Raiders were a playoff team. Got to remind everyone that TJ Watt missed 2 games and half of 4 others. So he missed entirely 2 games, 4 others, portions of 6 games out of 17. He was only a full participant in 11 games this season. And that's I didn't even look that in depth at it. That's just a little bit of just the cursory glance at it. And it's like he has a chance to be Defensive Player of the Year, and we're wondering why when he's not on the field, the defense might not be good. It just kind of drives me crazy. So did they really... John Simon changed his number again. I just happened to be looking at this. This is absolutely crazy. No, he was wearing 38 here with the Steelers too. It's like, even I don't know. Okay, I know 57 is Montrevious Adams. He's one of the free agents I'm coming up with. But you got John Simon, 31 years old. We'll see. Is he old and slow, or will he be in this category? We'll find out. But it's definitely something where they're insulating themselves. Let's get to that cap room. I said it's a little over $31 million. I don't know if this includes some of the rollover figures. I've seen as much as $8 million, $9 million rollover. I don't know if it includes that as well. There's also some other moves that can be done. I don't know if some of these moves will be done. I would like to go through my whole wish list, but I'm going to save that maybe for another day. Some of this will come up. We'll just put it this way. They're not... I don't see them moving on from inside linebackers, okay? There's too many other things here that you got to figure out. So let me start with the first guy is signed, obviously, the long snapper, Christian Kuntz, okay? So we already mentioned him, $825,000. I would like to make that kind of money, by all means, but not a huge amount when you're talking about putting someone on the roster. There's some exclusive rights players that are available here, and to the Steelers, what that really means is somebody else has to give up, usually an original round, and in the case of players like J.C. Hassenauer, original round they were drafted in, I'm sorry, complete that thought. So J.C. Hassenauer, somebody who wasn't drafted at all, actually came over from the Alliance of American Football, Birmingham Iron, who the Steelers were working with down there, and Tim Lewis, former linebacker and also defensive coach with the Steelers during the Cowher eras and whatnot. He was the head coach down there. So you get a little bit of pipeline. I wish they might have some development football. I don't know what this USFL is going to look like. And the return of Jeff Fisher, that's scary in and of itself. DeMarcus Acey, a corner. So those are your exclusive rights guys. They're more than likely will be back and at pretty much the league minimum. I would imagine you're more or less talking about training camp bodies. We know Hassenauer is a little more than that and got some starts. Is that where the Steelers want to go at the position this heading into this offseason and going to training camp? I would think not. As a backup where he could play guard or center, totally cool with it. He could come back. And there's a handful of restricted rights free agents here. So restricted free agents, if they're tendered, as is the case with Dwayne Haskins, original round tender. So this was the tab I actually closed out of that. I got to read it here from NFL.com just to have everyone understand here. So if Dwayne Haskins was tagged with a first round tender, it would be a 1-year contract worth the greater of $4.7 million or 110% of the player's prior base salary. So it would probably be the $4.7 million. But that's not going to be the case. Because he wasn't tagged with the first-round tender. But just to explain this, if the player's original team decides not to match an offer sheet signed with another team, it is entitled to a first-round draft pick from the player's new team. Some other kind of administrative things here with offer sheets and everything else. So I won't get into all that. The second-round tender is a 1-year contract worth the greater of $3.38. And the reason I say with the original, some of the original rounds and things of that nature, you've got things like unrestricted free agents. They have 4 more accrued seasons and expired contract. They're free to negotiate with any team. The restricted free agents, however, is a player with just 3 accrued seasons and an expired contract. They're free to negotiate and sign with any team, but their original team can offer them one of various qualifying offers, tenders that come with the right of first refusal or draft pick compensation. If the tender is withdrawn by a team, the RFA becomes an unrestricted free agent. Okay, and then they have some dates here, sort of the administrative stuff, but those are all last year's dates, so just to explain that. So you could do a second-round tender, and it has to do with draft pick compensation and how much you're paying a player. And in a lot of cases, you're not maybe throwing something like a second-round tender at, let's say, Robert Spillane, who is averaging $850,000 a year. You're not pay bumping him up to $4 million. They did do this with Emmanuel Sanders several years ago, and like I said, a lot of this has to deal with how valuable is this player? Well, Dwayne Haskins is a former first-round draft pick, but they're going to hit him not with a right of refusal, but a original round tender, which means 1-year contract worth the greater of $2.183 million, or the 110%. The draft choice compensation is a pick in the round the player was originally drafted in. So this is a raise from what Haskins was making, bottom basement, league minimum, $850,000 last season. And now, with this tender, since he was originally a first-round draft pick, see, Robert Spillane undrafted. That's not a guy that you could put an original round tender on. If you felt the need to retain Robert Spillane and you threw a second round or right of refusal, which is it's like 500 or 50,000 or something less. I don't know what the math is on that. But there's no, it's a right of refusal. There's no draft compensation. It just allows the Steelers. So if somebody goes sniffing at Robert Spillane, let's say the New England Patriots come around and are like, hey, Bob Spilly here. We're going to give you X amount of money this season, like $4 million. The Steelers can match that if they place a tender on that player. Chances are, I don't know if they would do it with Spillane. But you can see the reason they're doing it with Haskins, because if anyone goes and tries to pluck Haskins and the Steelers decide to not match whatever contract that might be. So Cleveland Browns come sniffing around. I'm not going to say it's necessarily them. Example. And they want Dwayne Haskins, and they're going to throw like a whole boatload of money at him, and the Steelers are just like, I don't know about that. We're not going to match that. That's just ludicrous. This guy was our clipboard holder last year. Go ahead, take him. We will gladly take your first round pick as compensation for that. So that's the original round tender. The original round tender is about half of the first round tender, which is $4.7 million down to 2.1. We'll just leave it at that. These decimal places will mess with my head. So do I think the Steelers will bring back Spillane or Haskins? And the other restricted free agent also is Marcus Allen. Kind of interesting because he got to play a little more. There's a couple things going on. You had COVID, you had injuries with Schobert and Bush and even Spillane, and you got to see Marcus Allen. You even got to see Ulysses Gilbert some at the tail end of last season. I didn't see Marcus Allen hardly at all for probably 3/4 of the season until you got into December. And of course, he's a converted safety. They like the kind of hybrid type deal, but I kind of tend to think, I don't know, it's somebody they could bring back. Will they absolutely bring him back? I don't know. Spillane depth. They drafted Buddy Johnson too. Gilbert not on this list though. Correct. I believe Gilbert still has maybe another season left. I'm going to double check here just to see. I forget what year on his contract he was, but just by sheer numbers with the inside linebackers, they're going to keep 4 or 5. Yeah, he'll enter year 4 here, I believe. So why did they make this always so difficult? Yes. So Gilbert still has another year left. Johnson's still there. Will they roll with them as the depth? It's quite possible. It's going to force one of these two out, I think, between Allen and Spillane, because even though the Steelers don't have a plethora of draft picks, we know that they target these late round linebackers, and because particularly they use them for special teams, but you're in a 3-4, so you're either going to need the edge or the inside guys as well. So we'll see what happens there. Dwayne Haskins, I think, is a no-brainer to bring back. You heard me pounding the gavel when it comes to the Steelers quarterback situation with Mason Rudolph and with Dwayne Haskins. And basically, those are the guys I want to go to battle with. Haskins, as you can see, you're not going to find another quarterback for that price that's actually started a number of NFL games and is a former first-round draft pick. Maybe the guy was in a bad setting. That's what everyone wants to say about other quarterbacks that are on like their 3rd or 4th team. There's only so many bad settings you could be in before it's the player. Or the player's ruined. You know, it could be because of the bad setting, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to come out of it either. Pick up some bad habits, et cetera, et cetera. All right, let's go. I should work from bottom to top just because it's a little sexier to do this, but I'm going to lose my place. So let's just go with Ben Roethlisberger's not coming back. He's retired. He was at the top of the food chain when it comes to the free agents. Joe Hayden turning 33 or just turned 33 years old. he will be a free agent. Do I bring Joe back? I could see Joe in a certain capacity. What I liked at the end of the year too, and this is the reason why some of the names I'm going to say on here I'm going to want to retain with the secondary, is because when you got, and I got to name them, I can't hold the cat in the bag here. Joe Hayden, Ahkello Witherspoon when he comes on, and Cam Sutton, and that combination worked it worked well. It didn't work well against Kansas City, but it's Kansas City. Two, they got absolutely gassed and trashed. The first quarter is what you were looking at. The offense could do anything to maybe take a few minutes out of that first quarter. That defense would have went into the second quarter, maybe even the halftime. They just got absolutely just murdered at a certain point too. When you know you're beaten, we've been there. If you've ever played anything competitive, even a video game or chess, you know when you're beaten and you're just waiting for it. Your head's down, right? A lot of heads were down in that game. It sucks, but you got to take it the way it is here. But Joe Hayden is all these guys are mostly unrestricted free agents. If they do have a void year in their contract, it's not worth mentioning. Their contract is still void, and he'll be an unrestricted free agent. Would I bring Joe Hayden back at 33 years old? Probably on a 1-year deal. He was making $11 million. It makes it a little less palatable, and at 33 and having missed 4 or 5 games this past season, I'm not exactly sure that he's a high priority for me. My higher priority, shooting down this list of few names, is Ahkello Witherspoon, and only made about $4 million this year. I would like to bring him back and instantly plug him in as one of the starters opposite Sutton. He maybe takes over for Joe Hayden, or maybe Terrell Austin ends up coming in. Remember, Joe Hayden played just one side of the field. Maybe these guys roam a little more. Very seldom did Joe Hayden ever track a man. He would cover the top wide receiver when they needed him to, but it wasn't a very frequent situation. I thought Witherspoon showed a lot. It's going to be interesting to see because other teams have noticed that. They might have thought the guy was washed after the trade from the Seahawks to the Steelers. The Steelers found something. I always felt, though, that he was maybe lying in wait here for the Steelers to do something else and make him a long-term solution here. He's 27 years old, so why not? Let's do it. Juju Smith-Schuster. He's the cover boy on this podcast. And yeah, I clickbait you a little bit because I found the perfect picture with him waving. And everybody's talking about his apartment and this and that. Well, that's in preparation if he has to move. I'm sure, being a California boy, that he just doesn't... the guy doesn't want to be in cold weather. So, growing up in warm weather, I grew up in cold weather and I don't want to be in it. So who could blame him? It's still young, 26 years old, man. And they spread some of his money out from the $8 million. He did because of all of the salary caps dropping. Teams didn't have the money to spend on wide receivers. They were unwilling to spend money on wide receivers. We'll see how that works this upcoming season. I know he wanted to make it a point to come back from his injury. He went to help his team. He's also helping himself. That's not bad business. That's great business. He could have just sat on his duff, but he raised some question marks as to his health and if he could play coming from the injury to a certain degree. He didn't have the biggest year the last couple years. We know the offensive coordinators and the quarterback play and everything else everything's been tied in. Offensive line, it's so muddled. Can he return to being a major contributor? A lot of people say he's not a wide receiver one. I'm in agreement to this. Was Hines Ward necessarily a wide receiver one? At points in his career, he's mostly wide receiver two. He's a guy who did a lot of the dirty work with blocking and whatnot. Moved the chains. Always a guy you could throw to and would move the sticks. Guys that remind me, like Wes Welker, Julian Edelman, Ed McCaffrey, Hines Ward, Juju Smith-Schuster, guys that move the sticks, and primarily, as you know, operating out of the slot too. Randall L., another guy you could throw into that conversation. I would not mind having Juju back because you're still relatively set. You got Deontay Johnson and you've got Chase Claypool, but 3 of the wide receivers are on this list from this previous roster, including Juju. You've got James Washington. Happy trails. There's a reason the Steelers, he's just not a fit. That's why he's not on the field. I understand he's Mason Rudolph's college target, and most people say bring him back. They're thinking Burrow and Jamar Chase. I don't think it's necessarily on that same level of connection. He makes plays here or there. I'm not saying he's necessarily terrible. I won't be upset if for some reason he's brought back into the fold. But we're talking about players who are expendable, replaceable. James Washington, they could draft somebody like 4th round, and James Washington is replaced. Ray McCloud, on the other hand, is interesting. I started calling him Antonio McCloud. He was making some circus catches and doing some things I wasn't expecting from him, to be completely honest. Drop here or there. We've seen that happen with everybody. He's also the specialist here. He at times leading the league in return yards, which shocks the hell out of me. So in that regard, I bring Ray back. I definitely bring Ray back. And Ray was only making $1 million last year. So, and that's the average per year too. It's not necessarily the full thing, because Ben Roethlisberger, it's his current average per year was 14, but that was on the tore up contract as well. You know what I mean? He was up there at about 40 mil, almost 42 or something before redoing that. So take the figures again, overthecap.com. If you happen to be sitting in front of a computer or got your phone or something, you can pull up these same things too under the Steelers and free agency for 2022 and kind of follow along. Eric Ebron, what I say about Eric Ebron? I mean, he'd be a fine player if he was healthy, inconsistent, just somebody you can move on from easily. You've got Pat Freiermuth now. We saw Zach Gentry take the next step. Extending Zach Gentry is like having another Matt Spaeth who actually catches the ball pretty well in certain circumstances. I mentioned Jay Sternberger, but don't forget my guy. I'm a complete homer for, totally biased for my guy from my same alma mater, and that's Kevin Rader. And he has worked his rear off for a roster spot. He's gotten some playing time. He's a special teams guy. They've taken note at his blocking ability. I think those are your 3 tight ends. Sternberger, he's in there. He's in the mix. He might fight for a position there, or he might be a guy that hangs around a year or two like Xavier Grimble did before finally getting on the field. And Grimble, for all the faults you could say about him, there were contributions that were there as well. And this is what you're trying to get. And maybe you end up with a diamond in the rough. Who knows? I think they're set at tight end. Eric Ebron, I don't anticipate being brought back. Trey Turner at right guard. God, it really matters. It's really going to matter on what they do with the center position. Are they going to continue the I want to call it the Kendrick Green experiment, because we know it's not his natural college position playing center, but they've tried to move the pulling guard style as they have in the past into that same mold. And he's working out this offseason with Marquise Pouncey. We saw it on Instagram. That's really cool. Maybe it helps. But if they slide him over to guard, there's no need, I don't think, for Trey Turner. And some people say, well, don't make that mistake necessarily with Green and maybe his size. And let's not forget Kelvin Beachum was an undersized tackle, and he's still playing to this day. He probably would have been with the Steelers over Ramon Foster had he not got hurt. And they saw what Alejandro Villanueva could do, and you find some of these undrafted guys that get plugged in like that. Both Foster and Villanueva, as I've mentioned in the past, undrafted. So not everybody has to be first-round picks necessarily. Middle-round picks here or there. Maybe Green's calling is to be a guard. I don't know. J.C. Hassenauer is still going to be there as maybe a reserve. There's some other men that I'm going to mention on here as well. Turner, veteran. Did he have the greatest season? Not necessarily, but the whole offensive line was just in shambles. So I'm not sure where you go with that. It all depends on what else they're looking at with free agency and the draft. Terrell Edmunds is my top priority this year. I banged my desk for Cam Sutton the same way. Witherspoon and Edmonds, 1A and 1B for me, because I want the secondary locked down before we're even thinking about any other free agency additions, any draft picks. A draft pick more than likely isn't going to be a high one. It isn't going to be someone that steps on the field like a Trey Norwood. It's going to be somebody late. We've seen Justin Lane not necessarily ascend into a starring role. James Pierre was an undrafted player who has probably fallen out of favor when it comes to playing on the defensive side of the ball. Special teams, maybe he'll still stick. So for me, trying to replace a corner and a safety, free agency or draft, and get them plugged in, and you got a lot of new faces. What I don't want is 5-6 new starters on defense. I'd like to bring some guys back. I think Edmonds paired with Fitzpatrick has been fine. The draft Twitter folks and the people who say Kevin Colbert drafts busts and all this other crap, they just don't. They're never going to want to admit whether Edmonds is good or not, and they're still sticking on things from like his rookie year. He wasn't even supposed to start. They had Morgan Burnett, who everyone, including myself, forgot about, who was hurt, couldn't stay on the field, and cried his way out of Pittsburgh. And then disappeared. Went to Cleveland, where most players go to die. Sorry for the handful of people who have to sympathize with the divided house here, but that's just the truth in the case of Morgan Burnett. And it sucks because he's brought on. That's just a really bad move by Kevin Colbert too. No, you don't know that the guy is just gonna. It's not like it costs a lot of money. You're bringing in a veteran. You're drafting somebody to try and find one of two players, hopefully, that fills the role at safety of where they needed it. Then they bring in and trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick. Now, I think they're a good pairing. I want to keep him. Miles Killebrew. He's a Terrell Austin favorite, so I expect him to be back. He's been following Terrell around. He's a fine special teams player. They've used him sparingly on some of these DB-heavy packages, kind of the same way they use Edmonds. He might be covering the slot, might be covering a tight end or running back in that nature. I think he comes back. He's a value veteran. I've mentioned James Washington. Josh Dobbs, this is an interesting one. Josh Dobbs did not make the 53-man roster this year. I continue to remind folks of that because the significance of that was when he was placed on injured reserve that he could not return. He had to be signed on the 53 first in order to be eligible to return. So for all intents and purposes, he was not someone who practiced with the team all season. He appeared to be, which most players on IR do not show up on the bench or on the sidelines. Dobbs was over there a lot, absorbing. Is he learning to try and throw his name in the hat with the quarterback competition? That's a mayhaps. That's one of my words. Mayhaps. Maybe, perhaps. Maybe as a future with coaching as well. We know he's a bright guy. He probably runs circles around me watching Jeopardy. I do expect Dobbs to come into this and just make for some really awful takes all summer and preseason. Why aren't they giving him more reps? If they don't add another quarterback somehow, which I don't expect it in free agency, the draft, it all depends on who's there. And that player is probably going to be the rookie clipboard holder. But Dobbs could be the clipboard holder here, too, and they could just roll with what they got. I'm cool with it. I'm cool. I mentioned Ray McLeod. Arthur Millette didn't have a bad season. You could bring him back. B.J. Finney will not be back. Too many injuries. Just never really played. I don't see it. I don't see a need. He's kind of been passed by JCH here. Taco Charlton, plucking a guy from the streets. I thought he did pretty well with the Steelers system. Spot duty, that's somebody I want to see as a starter. For depth, absolutely fine. First round pedigree, you get some of the same upside that I was talking about, potential upside. So I was talking about with Dwayne Haskins or some other players. Bring him back. By all means, bring him back. He is unrestricted. He was making under $1 million. Montravius Adams, a personal favorite of mine. I have him high up here. I have him with like Witherspoon and Edmonds. He's not a 1. He's maybe like a 3 on my priority list. But geez, I thought he did really well. And you're dealing with 33-year-old Tyson Alualu coming back from an injury. You don't know the future of Stephon Tuitt with his brother and going on IR with the knee operation and everything earlier, heading into the season basically, or during the summer, whenever it happened, as I alluded to in one of the previous shows. And you don't know the status of Tuitt. I mean, having both of those guys back would be just lights out. You forget you have Cam Hayward. Chris Wormley was supposed to be rotational. It could fill in for Tuitt if Tuitt doesn't play. Adams is the guy that needs to fill in for Alualu if he can't play. I thought Adams was eating up blocks. He was getting penetration. You even got Chris Collinsworth acknowledging the guy. He wore 57, which is your 57 Heinz variety. I like it. Mark it all down. He said he wants to be here. Go for it. I absolutely. And don't forget Isaiah Loudermilk as well. So some of the failed names that were called up or didn't work out or were getting playing time, Isaiah Buggs, Carlos Davis, Daniel Archambault. Adams surpassed all of them like that week coming off the Saints practice squad and got inserted in the lineup. I think that's very promising. Who else do we have? Oh, I'm gonna PO someone with this one too. Kalen Ballage. I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, we kind of have we have Najee Harris. You're gonna have like 3 running backs, maybe 4. They had 4 last year. I thought it was a little awkward, but that's also because McFarland started on IR as well. I'm not sure how they feel McFarland fits with Canada's schemes. I didn't see a whole lot from Balaj. I mean, we saw it in preseason. I know he's capable. He dropped some passes. He's supposed to be a guy that could catch out of the backfield. Didn't really. Struggled a little bit in pass pro as well. That's why you didn't see him a whole lot during the regular season. He's kind of one of those veteran guys that comes and goes, like maybe a Stephen Ridley or, Wendell Smallwood, who didn't really get any time the year before either. It's a coin flip because they could easily just pick someone else up from another roster that's a free agent in the same type of category, because I think you know what Balaj is. You might not know what the fit is for the other players. So, again, not upset if he returns because I saw some of the same things that some of you did, but I didn't see enough of that when it counted. Chukwuma Okorafor, my final guy, right tackle. All these starts over the last few years was supposed to be Zach Banner. I don't anticipate. Zach Banner is under contract. He could be a cap casualty. I don't know that he is back to full health. I don't know what the Steelers' plans are for him. Would they go with Banner over bringing back Chooks? I wonder what Chooks' market's going to be. They're going to let him test. I don't think that they'd straight up just re-sign him. But I am concerned because you still have to do something at center. I think Dan Moore will grow. Your left guard or right guard, maybe they move Green over and Dotson to the other side, right? And you have your two guards, but you still got to find a center. And now you're going to have to find a right tackle. It's a lot of moving parts still. And I said the last offseason, this is a 2 to 3 year process in order to get the offensive line completely shored up. You might want to bring this guy back. He's adequate. I'm not saying he's, all pro or Pro Bowl, but you got to have some guys that are at least adequate players. And he's already been here. You get a little bit of chemistry. You got to get some chemistry. You can't keep shuffling the 5 starters out, in and out like they did, especially at left guard. That caused a lot of problems as well. So Chukwuma Okorafor, I guess it depends on what they would have to pay him. He may get a rich contract somewhere else with somebody that has a little bit more money and a little bit more need. I really don't know. It's hard for me to guess on this one, just because of how poorly as a unit the Steelers' offensive line has been. You tend to feel just, okay, expendable, let him go. You go in the draft, are you going to be able to find a tackle to replace him? You're probably going like first round, second round at the latest. Are you looking at center? What if the quarterback falls to you, and now you have the situation of last year? You go with Najee Harrison, you find Pat Freiermuth there in the second round, and you end up passing on one of the centers there, and you come back around, swing back around, and pick Kendrick Green, and that doesn't work out. You're in almost the same kind of situation with your positions of need if you end up going, and you're like, oh, quarterback's there, this is the best player available. Let's just say it's Kenny Pickett. It won't be. I highly doubt it. But let's just say he's there. And they love him, and we've heard all this jazz. And now all of a sudden you're still, what's this offensive line going to look like here in the future, especially if you haven't signed anybody in free agency. Now, free agency can change all of that thinking, so I'm not necessarily there, but a lot of the free agents who are available, the best of the crop is Ryan Jensen, and he's up there in age too. He's in his 30s. I don't necessarily know that he is the long-term solution. And there's a bunch of other ones like Billy Price, or I mentioned the year before, Ethan Posick. These guys are untouchable now. Those aren't the guys I want at center as far as free agents. It's not a very good crop of players. In the draft, though, I think you'll find offensive line is not only deep from what I'm seeing, but also the center class won't be too bad, but there is a gem there from the Linderbaum from Iowa. So anyways, enough of that. Got some of my thoughts on the free agents, some of my wish lists. I got some more things that I'll be talking about here in the near future. Hopefully Ryan gets to join me on account of talking about his experience with the Reese's Senior Bowl down there in Mobile, Alabama. And as always, folks, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I try not to be too long-winded when I don't have Brian here, but obviously I don't have a choice. I'm all by myself. I'm just flying free. And we'll hope maybe we'll revisit some of this, because really, what else are we going to have to talk about in February and March and stuff? You know what I mean? We'll get some free agent talk. We'll talk some more about the roster composition and stuff, and some things that we would like to see happen. And we'll see some of those things get in motion here in the coming weeks as well. So we'll have topics we need to talk about. Appreciate your patience if I'm beating a dead horse here. Okay, I really try not to, and trying to come up with new material though. We know how it is. That's why we're not a daily show, okay? So my name's Joe Kuzma. I appreciate all of you for checking us out here at the Steel City Underground Podcast. And as we always say, until next time, Everyone out there, be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.